Welcome to the Thomas Padlan-Malm Hour. For an hour, I'm hoping to talk to people in my life who I know to be much smarter than myself, who are going to kind of understand the things that I'm talking about in ways that maybe a general population might not, based on raw intelligence and physiological limitations, based on where they were born and how they were raised and the incomes that they were nurtured from. There are a whole range of factors that decide how it is we think and how it is we conclude things that are way beyond our control. And the people I need to talk to are the ones that understand that. We're going to talk about capitalism. We're going to talk about business and how businesses should work and how they once worked and stopped working. We're going to talk about a range of tools and best practices that are useful to build and grow in sustainable and dependable, predictable ways. We're going to talk about a range of core issues that really begin the conversation. And the first is a series that was written for Harvard Business Review in the middle 2000s, I think like 2006 or so. And it was from the principles of a consulting firm pretty much unlike any in the world and well open for competitors to try to steal their thinking in their business. But the best I can do is share it and build upon it. You can do a tremendous amount of stuff without spending a nickel. You can have incredible amounts of impact without spending a dime. Hi, I'm Thomas Padlan-Malm, and welcome to the Thomas Padlan-Malm Hour. And in the hour, what we're going to talk a lot about is, thinking and strategy and generally how we get along here in America and who we are, what our identity is and where we're heading, where we've been, what our bearings had been and how they've changed, and where we might be able to go if we take a step back and think a little bit better than maybe we have been.
I want to share with you a question that has fundamentally changed how I evaluate every strategy, every plan, every moment where resources are on the line. The question is this: what must be true for this to work? Not how do we win. That question gets corrupted by ego, by status, by the need to look smart in the room. When you ask what must be true, you strip away hope, charm, the resume, the applause. You force yourself to identify the actual conditions of success before you ask anyone to believe. Let me walk you through the method I use. First, observation. Not casual impression collecting, but disciplined waiting before naming. You watch what people actually do, not what they say they value. Second, structure. Talent has appeal, but structure gives talent a place to report. A plan is not a binder or a forecast dressed as authority. A plan is a sequence: assumptions, choices, tests, corrections. Third, language. Poor language creates poor conduct. If you say alignment when you mean obedience, you teach silence. Language is not decoration. Language is a control system. Fourth, adoption. New ideas meet resistance because resistance is often rational. People protect routines that have kept them safe. Here's what I know from working across business, politics, music, sport. Markets punish fantasy with unusual speed. A product either earns adoption or it does not. The romantic story is that instinct wins. The truth is that structure, patience, and tactical discipline beat improvisational brilliance more often than people admit. So here's your practical principle. Before you launch, before you commit, ask what proof belongs in front of whom. Ask who must believe first. Ask what would have to change for the outcome to change. That question alone will save you from the kind of failure that looks like bad luck, but was actually bad seeing.
One of the things we're going to talk about during the Thomas Padlan-Malm Hour is we're going to talk about information. We're going to talk about thinking. We're going to talk about intelligence. We're going to talk about planning. We're going to talk about American history. We're going to talk about American business history. We're going to have case examples and understanding about what works. But what we're really going to talk about is how we can claim our communities the way the Constitution intended for us. And it's motivated by two or three things. One, it's motivated by, my very first memory, the one that that had sort of set my thinking for everything in my life. And that was, when I was, I don't even remember how old. But I had a silver cup. And I keep it to remind me. I had a silver cup that it's certainly not as silvery looking as it should, but when I was baptized into Roman Catholicism as a baby, my godparents gave me a silver cup. And my earliest memories, my earliest understanding, my earliest possession was given to me by my godparents. And one day my mother, my very first memory, my mother asked me if I wanted some high C. If you're old enough, you know that was probably in your refrigerator when you were living in 1958. She asked me if I wanted some high C, and I said, yes, can I have it in my silver cup? And she said, what silver cup? She said, my silver cup that my godparents gave me. But I'm remembering that I asked for this and articulated that I remember having this cup that my godparents gave me, and now the person who brought me into the world, who taught me almost everything I know so far, and who I trust more than anyone. She said, what silver cup? And went on to this whole conversation about, I don't remember a silver cup. I don't remember a silver cup. And when I got married the first time, after the rehearsal dinner, my mom met me, and before she left to go back to her hotel, and she reaches into her purse and she pulls this out and she goes, do you know what this is? Here I am, a little boy, and the first memory is, wow, if that didn't happen, if this really didn't exist, did I dream it? And this literally started a life that made me just trying to absorb information. It's called traumatic intelligence. And it wasn't abuse. But every time I ever hear anything, what's missing? What's not right about this? Most of us don't get to the place where we ask, what's missing?
When job growth numbers are posted, do you understand them? What does this mean to the American pupil in 5 years? What will the workforce be? Who will not keep up? How will employment be prioritized? Who will decide?
There is a profound, structurally accurate parallel between the fictional worlds of Star Wars and Mad Max and the historical realities of the American Gilded Era. All three landscapes operate on the principle of extreme social stratification, masked by mechanical or industrial progress. While the tools of advancement evolve, from steam engines and steel mills to hyperdrives and specialized wasteland vehicles, the underlying human distribution of power remains primitive, tribal, and deeply inequitable. In Star Wars, the Outer Rim planets like Tatooine exist in absolute squalor, governed by slavery, moisture farming, and the criminal cartel of the Hutts. In Mad Max, the wasteland consists of brutalized populations scavenging for water and gasoline under warlords like Immortan Joe. This directly mirrors the raw frontier of Manifest Destiny and the immigrant slums of New York. While robber barons manipulated markets from Manhattan, the working class endured company towns, labor abuses, and dangerous extraction work in mines and railways. There was gang rule, protection, and tribalism, not unlike the fictional worlds. We can expect power, in the absence of a strong, equitable state, to revert to regional syndicates. Mad Max features specialized cults and gangs. The War Boys, buzzards, fighting over resources. Star Wars relies on the Pikes, Crimson Dawn, and Hutt clans to enforce local order through protection rackets. During the Gilded Era, the exact environment of the gangs of New York era existed, including Tammany Hall, the Bowery Boys, and the Dead Rabbits. Newly arrived immigrants, including the foundational generations of families like the Trumps, who operated hotels and restaurants in rugged boomtowns, navigated a world where ethnic divisions dictated safety, employment, and political allegiance. Protection was bought, not guaranteed by law. The ultimate consequence of this hyper-competitive, corrupt spoil system was the assassination of President James A. Garfield by Charles Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker. This elevated Chester A. Arthur, a man deeply entrenched in the corrupt New York political machine, to the presidency. This political shockwave mirrors the frequent violent transitions of power in sci-fi dystopias, where the assassination of a leader or warlord instantly elevates an unexpected lieutenant, forcing them to either perpetuate the corrupt machine or unexpectedly reform it, as Arthur surprisingly did by signing the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act.
Let's start right here with this cartoon. Now, when I saw this posted, it proved to me that we're pretty much hardwired spectators, that we're pretty much in general responding and reacting based on the circle of friends, the community that we exist in. And, we can be pleased by what we consider our patriotism, our unique ability to see what others miss, our interest in informing and helping others to know what's truth. And when people do post things like this, I know it's never with any ill intention. And in this particular case, the irony fails to escape me. Now, the person who was reposting this believed they were making a point, I suppose. And it's, my dearest and closest friend and probably the most trusted person in my life besides my wife. But we also were raised differently, educated differently, brought up in different situations, and every morning woke up with a different sense of our personal security just because we were born differently. But then again, when I look at this list, and it talks about how we're not victims. About 20 years ago, I'm not sure exactly when it was, and I was, in Wilmington visiting my mom, and I picked up the paper just randomly. And there was a story about the police visiting a home in the middle of the morning, thinking 3 to 4 o'clock, because the adults in the home had missed their methadone treatments. And because they were court-appointed methadone treatments, the police eventually were going to have to go and see if, what's up? Why aren't you there? When the police arrived, according to the story, there was one pre-adolescent aged or early adolescent aged girl, and maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 other children as young as 2 years old in the house. Both parents completely obliterated, unconscious from alcohol consumption. And social services were called to the house because of the filth and lack of attention that it was given. So we have a household full of procreating heroin addicts who are unconscious in the middle morning hours, and there are no victims. Free does not mean free. And I think about the price of freedom through the old Up With People song. There was a song they did, Freedom Isn't Free. In ancient Rome, they felt so free, doing what comes naturally. They were so busy being merry ones, they didn't even notice the barbarians. As I see ballroom construction, as I see MMA fighters wrapping the American flag like a sweat towel around their bodies, I wonder if we're acting a little too naturally to keep our freedom. I'm wondering if we've yet learned to identify who the barbarians might be. I wonder how we measure the price and value of anything and the symbols that we said we're supposed to be defending.
Futuristic societies of Star Wars and Mad Max present a direct structural parallel to the American Gilded Era, specifically regarding the coexistence of hyper-stratified elites and a brutalized, gang-ruled lower class. Science fiction does not predict the future. It holds a mirror to the past. The worlds of Star Wars and Mad Max are not fantasies born of pure imagination. They are structural echoes of late 19th century America. Consider the dichotomy of the Gilded Era. On one hand, you have a technological explosion, transcontinental railroads, steel manufacturing, and the birth of modern electricity. On the other hand, you have the absolute squalor of New York's 5 Points, the exploitation of immigrant labor, and the rise of corporate fiefdoms known as company towns. This is exactly what we see in the outer rim of Star Wars, or the citadels of Mad Max. The technocracy advances, but humanity is left behind. When we look at the criminal cartels of Tatooine, we are looking at Tammany Hall and the gangs of New York. When we look at the corporate greed of the Trade Federation manipulating the Galactic Senate, we are looking at the robber barons who manipulated the U.S. Senate to the point of political assassination, culminating in the death of President Garfield. The parallel is clear. Whether the currency is spice, gasoline, or steel, the concentration of unchecked power always results in a fractured society ruled by warlords at the bottom and corporate oligarchs at the top. But then, while the aesthetic parallels are striking, we must look at the structural intent. The Gilded Era, for all its immense flaws, labor abuses, and corporate greed, existed within a framework of institutional building. It was a chaotic, often predatory transition toward a highly organized, regulated modern state. In contrast, Mad Max represents total societal collapse and the permanent death of institutions. It is post-institutional. Star Wars represents a cyclical, galactic-scale authoritarianism. Furthermore, the immigrant populations of the Gilded Era, such as Fred Trump's parents or the millions who arrived at Ellis Island, operated within a system that, however brutal, offered a path toward upward mobility and legal reform, such as the Pendleton Act under President Arthur. The disenfranchised in Mad Max have no such framework. They live in a permanent state of static survival. If there is any conclusion, it may be that the parallel is deeply worth noting, because it highlights a universal historical truth. Technology changes, but human systems of exploitation remain remarkably consistent. When central governments prioritize laissez-faire economics or lose the monopoly on violence, society naturally fractures into the tribalism, gang rule, and stark inequality seen in both the history books of the 1880s and the sci-fi epics of today.
In my series last year, I showed a picture of Senator Ron Johnson sitting talking about when Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, the 75th Postmaster General, was hired in 2020 in his first hearing in Congress. There was this big, exciting, everybody doing backflips because he came in and in the first day he got trucks on time and he stopped the overtime. $4 billion, $6 billion in immediate savings. They made reforms. They weren't as perfect a reforms as they should have been because we still have another issue that hangs in there and is the core issue that if fixed would fix everything. And boy, I was talking about that years ago. But if we just looked at what we send to Congress, we have to talk about strategically the core issue. What we're dealing with when we look at a number like this, we're looking at people manipulating numbers, people creating stories to make sense so that they can keep their power and stay elected. When the fact of the matter is, none of it makes sense at all, and it just exposes their stupidity. The person who reposted this that said you're not entitled to someone else's hard-earned money ever, I'm processing this. In a nation in which the citizens have the rare power to elect their peers, we've seen a generation of dismantling of regulations that were set from the lessons learned from all places, the Gilded Age that our current president sees as when America was its greatest. We can look past the obvious and ask ourselves to contemplate a much greater abstract issue, and that is, what kind of leadership can we expect in a nation where 80% of all the wealth is held by people who inherited it? This post says that you cannot tax a nation into prosperity. Now, our founding fathers knew this. They also had a clear realization that wealth carries a noble obligation. Our nation was not built from an extractionist mentality. As the president ran in 2024, he talked about the gangs of New York. He spoke of manifest destiny. And in that mentality, some are favored and some become food. The rich are not responsible for your situation either. How do most of the people get rich in America? Well, they're born to it. They're mostly given it. And in the past, they even inbred to keep it. And we have a president who was elected more times than any other president, whose wife, when she married him, didn't have to change her name. More government always means less freedom. Absolute stupidity. I could argue that if we take away government, you won't be able to get to work. I can say that if we take away government, you won't know whether what you'll eat for dinner tonight will kill you or not. I could take away all the government. We wouldn't have schools for you to send your child. Where should I stop here? Where's government costing you your freedom? It's interesting because you look at the covers and the boxes are all checked, and we've done all these things. And as we talk, we're going to find out there's probably not the things we should have been doing because it's not the business we should be in. And we can look at the outcomes of everything that we were told we would be investing in to make things better, that in 2023 version 1.0 of Delivering for America said would make us bring us to our break even, which is the only thing the Postal Service is supposed to do. We have to have a conversation. We have to have a conversation about government and governance. And, I devoured the high school civics book from cover to cover, probably read it 3 times when I was 12 or 13 years old, sharing a bedroom with my oldest brother. I also read his the state motor vehicle department driver's manual. And, I read them both when I shared a room with my brother. They were sitting on the headboard or on the desk, and I just would pick them up before I go to read them. Driver's manual or civics. When I got to high school, there was the driver's manual. It was pretty much the same book. And when I took the test, I scored 98. When I got to high school, they stopped teaching civics. Now, as we talk about the change in our population, I played ice hockey until I was about 50 years old. I didn't start until I was about 38 years old. But in in the year 2000, the year 2001, and the year 2002, I was the captain of a team that played in the men's over 40 national championship. Now, I held clinics and camps when I was the hockey director in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I had a clinic one time where there was this young boy who was about 7 or 8 years old, and he was remarkable in skates. Actually, he was a little older than that. He was probably 10 or 11. And we're trying to do a clinic with a lot of kids, and we're trying to teach them specific things with specific disciplines to repeat and drill so that expertise appears over time. But some people, they're just natural. They just go and it just happens. But we were trying to teach specific things that over a period of time you need to know in order to be effective as a team player in a team sport with people who are just as good as you. I told them, I want to just tell you what a great skater you are. It doesn't happen every day that someone puts on skates, steps on the ice, and just so immediately is able to do the things that you do, to do the drills, to skate so fast, and so it just doesn't happen. Now, I said, take a look at, Coach Stefan. You see how he played. He went to college on a scholarship for ice hockey, and he won a national championship as a bantam when he was 14 or 15 years old. But I played in 3 national championships as the captain of my team, and when you see me skate, you don't see the same thing. And I said, there are certain things, certain gifts that we are endowed with, and there are certain things that we just have to face as realities. And my end is, I have to figure out another way to compete other than head-to-head physicality and athletics. Now, you can't give me what you have that can make you a champion someday. But I can give you what I have. And added to what you have, it could make you impossible to beat and the most valuable player on any team you're ever on. 10 or 11-year-old boy, and he looked at me and he just said, "Thank you, Coach." Today, 90% of our information comes from as few as 6 sources, and currently we're trying to merge them. Today, the White House constantly talks about how untrustworthy the American media is, and he's been very successful in making Americans not believe in the election systems, because most people in America never saw a civics book. Too many people in America have no idea when elections even happen, on what day. Now, if we expand from that, from the most fundamental truths of our elections, we might understand why some people might not want states to control their elections. I mean, if I were a huge fan of a party and I could be sure there was a way by stripping control of elections from the states and making sure every federal election has a federal federal watchdog making sure every single person who comes in to vote is federally screened to make sure they are the exact right people to be voting. I can do it with the same confidence I know that when they're handcuffed and put on a bus and taken to an airplane to be flown back to Korea because they're illegals that need to be removed from our country. I can feel really comfortable in telling the government, the federal government, to step in and take control. Now, I want to express that a splinter, a true splinter of civics creeped into South Carolina recently because the president has asked all the states to make sure their districts align the way that supports the heritage of America and the manifest destiny that was promised during the inaugural speech just 2 years ago. Now, this is an interesting situation because the president has begun asking states to look at their redistricting. And in many cases, states have. And in many cases, other states have responded in retaliation. But in South Carolina, where we did declare our independence from the United States before, I mean, we've had 2 declarations of independence in this state. In South Carolina, the federal government came down and told them, need to get rid of those people from that district so I can have more power. And in South Carolina, they're saying, wait a second. We believe that we should rule what we have. Don't come in here telling us that we're not doing it the way it's going to help you most. In South Carolina, we are independent in spirit and everything else. Now, after the last primary, only 2 states in the nation have more than 15% of its residents polling in favor of the current president. Now, in all of the other red states, they poll in favor of the president, but not by more than 15%. And what we need to do now is talk about what that means, what people are looking for, and what the market might embrace. I'm inviting people who I was in elementary school with, who will, as they see the program go on through the next few episodes, they'll start seeing exactly how important to me they have been in my life, and how in some way they've registered in just about everything that I've been successful at. So I'm going to talk to those folks. I'm going to talk to some of the people in my family who are capable of thinking, and I don't mean that insultingly. There are some really educated people who, in my family, I've seen do things like post stuff whether they knew it was true or not because they liked the argument that it made for a side that they wanted to declare. Can't declare sides here. Can't ignore the facts either. I want to reach to the people who I've seen make changes in the world more quietly, who might have a thought or an opinion. One of the motivations for this conversation was 2018, a deja vu moment. 2018, where I sat down at the marina bar where I was keeping my boat, where I was living on my boat at the time. And I sat down because they did this happy hour that, for $5 I could sit down and I could have pretty much dinner at 4 or 5 o'clock, chase it down with a beer and go home for less than $7 or $8. About $10. And trust me, if you knew me for any time at all, I probably was there to linger for maybe a second or third beer. And while I did, the conversation next to me was some young men that were probably in their early 30s, late 20s. They were having a very serious conversation about, in 28 things, why the things that they thought they were voting for weren't matching up with what was happening. They thought they were voting for a kind of strength that just turned into a, well, not to get involved in it, but just as you would expect in every off-year election, the person living in the White House who had been elected 2 years before was finding that seats in Congress were going to shift to the other party because it almost always does. And that's because we don't vote for anything that's meaningful. We vote for this noise or that noise. We don't ask any questions. But these guys were asking some questions, and they were going, they had flyers and newspapers, and they're in their phones, and they're talking. And I said, have you ever noticed how when most people who tell you they're deeply politically committed and deeply politically informed and knowledgeable and really studied on the issues, it's like they're talking about their high school football team or their college football team, their pro football team. But the conversation we need to have is we have a generation that never learned how to think, never learned how to do business. I asked Mr. Carey in 6th grade, after we had this conversation about why we have to go to war to make sure that we don't let this domino wave take of a communism consume all of the world and have totalitarianism everywhere so that everyone in the world has to do what one person says. And people in the class were like, oh, that could never happen here. Because their parents, they went to war and they killed Hitler. They went to war and they killed the Japanese. They went to war and they made America free and safe while the whole world was being consumed by everyone else. And now I see we pull out the red carpet for a guy who gets off a plane with his assistant wearing a t-shirt that says CCCP, who talks about Monroe Doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, yet sits down with a Liberian president and can't understand why his English is perfect.
And also, we want to encourage American involvement in the investment in Liberia. Yeah. We'd like to see that happen. We want to work with the United States in peace and security within the region because we are committed to that. And we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. It's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well,
Very
and
good, sir. Thank you.
they come from here. So thank you very much.
Liberian history is American history. Liberia was a U.S. colony established during the James Monroe presidency. They have always spoken English.
And we'll take this to another moment in my life. I keep this as a reminder every day. This is my Memorial Day reminder. It says Champs 69. There was one from a couple years ago that was before then that was even more important. It was the first time we were the conference champs. And this represents a lot of things to me. This represents the first people that I loathed, that in my stomach I knew were horrible. Those people who swam in the lanes for Valley Brook swim team at the Valley Brook Swim Club. They beat us all the time. Except when Coach Charlie met them the first time. Now, I started swimming as an 8-year-old. I lived right across the street from the community swimming pool. And I was in the pool, I was, from the time I was 7 and competing from the time I was 8. There was no 10 and under, so I was one of the few 8-year-olds that was actually fast enough to get some lane time and compete. In fact, I competed in the maximum 3 events. Every year I swam on the swim team. And I swam in the second lane, always against the faster swimmer. And usually, for my first, when I was 8 and when I was 9, I swam breaststroke, butterfly, and freestyle relay. I was the 4th fastest freestyle swimmer on the team in my age group. I was the 2nd fastest breaststroker in my age group. I was the 2nd fastest butterflyer in my age group. And one day, in the new year, with a new coach, we're going to meet Valley Brook. And on the bulletin board, the game plan is posted. What events are we going to be swimming in? And I looked at mine. Okay, there's butterfly, breaststroke. Somebody else's name was swimming breaststroke. And then I looked at, I'm swimming backstroke. And I didn't understand it. So I went to Coach Charlie and I said, Coach Charlie, I don't swim backstroke. He said, let me show you something. And he took me into his office and he sat me down and he showed me his folder. He opened it up, he had his notebook, and he had all of the times of all, apparently he had somebody going to all the meets and recording all the times, or he was at least going through the trouble of collecting all the times of all the meets, and so that he knew how fast everybody was that was competing. And when he went through and he showed me breaststroke, he showed me that the person in the 2nd lane for Valley Brook was faster than me at breaststroke. And we wouldn't get any points. Then he showed me that the person who's swimming backstroke was faster than our 2nd fastest person that typically swam backstroke. And he said, and we wouldn't get a point for that. But take a look at this. And he showed me my backstroke time against all the other backstroke times of the people my age. And I was the 2nd fastest. He said, you're faster than their 2nd lane. We can get a point here. Now, if you're 10 years old and someone takes the time to explain that to you, it's going to make an impression.
Today, many Americans feel that their government no longer represents them. They see a Congress that seems to answer not to the voters in their districts, but to wealthy donors and powerful lobbying groups. This is a crisis for our democracy. It challenges the fundamental principle that our government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. A new project, the Agora Initiative, offers a potential solution. It is not a new political party. Instead, it is a method, a disciplined process to find representatives who serve the public interest, not private power. Why is it so important to have 435 separate agoras? The answer lies in the nature of our country. The United States is not a monolithic entity. It is a vast, diverse nation of distinct communities, economies, cultures, and challenges. A congressional district in rural Nebraska has different needs than one in downtown Los Angeles. Large national parties must create broad platforms. Those platforms often fail to address local specificities and leave people unheard. One-size-fits-all flattens real concerns. This structural gap weakens the bond between a representative and their district. An agora, a local meeting place, helps overcome that gap. In the agora, people gather local data, hear local experts, and define clear district priorities. Through the agora, the group identifies a candidate who understands those needs, not a national mold. Work done in the agora restores the representative as an agent of their constituents. An agora is a local place where a small group meets for one task: identify a potential congressional candidate not beholden to party machinery or special interest money. A true peer from the community, whose primary allegiance is to the people of their district. This is not about creating a third party. This meeting process is a filtering mechanism to elevate better candidates for existing parties, or support an independent who can win. The challenge is not a lack of good people. It is a system that rewards the wrong behaviors. Today, incentives favor centralized fundraising, party loyalty, and divisive rhetoric over broad consensus. The Agora initiative counters these pressures by structuring local vetting around integrity, intelligence, and public service. It changes outcomes by first changing how we select who represents us. A party is built to win power. An agora is the meeting place for a search committee to find the best public servant for one district. The work of an agora must be grounded in intellectual discipline. The initiative's manual begins with three foundations: separate fact, inference, and hypothesis. A fact is information that can be independently verified as true. The district's unemployment rate was 5% last quarter is a fact. Without agreed facts, no productive conversation is possible. An inference is a conclusion drawn from facts, a step beyond raw data. From 5% unemployment, one might infer, the local economy is struggling, but context can reverse that judgment. Perhaps it's a significant improvement. A hypothesis is a testable claim about cause and effect. If we invest in job training, unemployment will fall below 3% within 2 years. Good hypotheses are specific and falsifiable, with a clear path for action and a metric for success. The second principle: always follow the incentives before you listen to the rhetoric. Words are cheap. A leader may denounce high drug prices and promise relief. If the same leader is funded by that industry, incentives conflict with words. Follow the money to predict behavior. Power, access, and attention are incentives too, often stronger than conviction. In the agora, the group vets funding sources, obligations, and past actions when interests conflict with stated values. It seeks leaders whose primary incentive is the trust of their district. Third principle: reduce noise before you make a judgment. Sensational cycles and outrage algorithms overwhelm clear thinking. In the agora, people tune out spectacle and focus on verified facts and real incentives. The Agora initiative is not a quick or easy victory. It is not a magic solution. It is a disciplined civic practice, a craft. Learn the rules of public reality and apply them with rigor. This is a slow, methodical path, building a healthier republic, one district at a time. Begin with a personal commitment. Slow down. Question reactions. Resist snap judgments. Separate fact from inference from hypothesis. Trace incentives beyond rhetoric. This is not mass protest. It is a network of small, dedicated groups. Vet for character and competence, not party label, not fundraising prowess. If you are ready for the serious work of citizenship, learn the rules, find your neighbors, and let's begin to take our Congress back.
After the Senate hearing on August 21st, 2020, I produced a document entitled Review and Recommendation that I sent in February 2021 to every major influence in the Postal Service. Within the confidential 12,874-word document, I pointed out that as a service business, the Postal Service has access to all American citizens and businesses. The Postal Service today serves more customers, more delivery points, and more businesses than any time in American history. We do it from more trucks, fewer employees, and less retail locations than a decade ago. The Postal Service has profitable partnerships that generate opportunities for even more profitable topside revenue than before, although those relationships are in crisis because of wrong thinking that's been injected in current management. The Postal Service today offers more profitable products and services than ever, although day by day they become less valuable. The Postal Service has the opportunity to generate topside income without additional expenses or manpower by meeting the established market value for sending a letter. The average price of mailing a letter from our top trading partners in free Europe is 98% greater than in the United States. The Postal Service has created millions of new relationships during the pandemic upon which to capitalize. It's less costly and easier to keep a customer than find a new one. But at the same time, we're introducing ourselves to new customers. Those new customers are seeing the values of their relationships with us less important because our products are changing and our services are eroding. We now have a 10-year plan that is sure to be a failure. As I campaign, I'm going to talk about that. I will open the conversation to a different approach that is more assured to prevail. I will discuss a different paradigm from labor and management in relationships. As I campaign for my presidency of the union, I'm going to promote the spirit that I see in my coworkers every day that has convinced me that the United States Postal Service must not retreat into its demise, but instead we must look at who we are, what we do, refocus, and capitalize on our world-class performance standard with eyes open for new and expanding possibilities. I will campaign for an empowering structure because I have seen how unlimited possibility is born when the door opens willingly to allow ideas, energy, talent, and a brighter vision for the common good in our future, without creating a distraction for our current and committed union leadership, who has attracted my unwavering respect. My campaign over the last year has tried to expand the conversation and wisdom of those with influence. It is appropriate, the day that I recorded this talk with you, that the United States Postal Service announced that a change was going to take place. As of today, there will be just one committed time for all priority mail express deliveries nationwide. It will be 6 p.m. The 10:30 a.m., noon, and 30 p.m. options will cease. And that's the direct words from the Postal Service. America, your value to the Postal Service is virtually meaningless today. Your needs are meaningless. American business, if you need it tomorrow, understand that you're going to have your express mail arriving an hour after you've closed. The brand promise has changed. In my campaign, we're going to talk of fixing this. In the meantime, America, I implore you to call your congressman. As I go forward, I will talk of the changes at hand and the fact that they cannot work to achieve the objectives imagined by current postal leadership. It's impossible. I will cite references, examples. I will talk about how this cost-focused idea is wrong. I will also be unrelenting in my continued messaging to the postal system influencers, the Board of Governors, the regulatory commissioners, the key influencers in Congress, and the American people who are the owners of the Postal Service. I expect there will be a pushback and a bit of fear caused by the ideas I will bring that could seem new, not so linear, and a bit unsettling at first, but not nearly as unsettling as the silliness that we're seeing coming from L'Enfant Plaza today.
These are the official P&L numbers of the USPS income since 2014 through 2025. However, in 2022, when reforms in April took place, the money that was set aside for employee retiree health care 70 years to the future, that money that was extracted that shows as losses from 2014 through 2019 were adjusted, put on topside revenue in 2022. However, if they were adjusted as the business actually would have taken place in the moment over those years, had that ridiculous fund plan not existed, we would have shown profit in 2014. We would have shown profit in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. And the $4+ billion in 2019 was restricted, would not allow us to meet market thresholds that were successful throughout the world. And that was a congressional decision. And that's why we need to stop the people who are running us now and replace them with people who know us and know what we need.
Remember the days when Main Street was the heart of our towns and cities? Family-owned businesses, local restaurants, a sense of community. Now it seems like every corner is dominated by the same chain stores and mega corporations. This isn't just about nostalgia, it's about economic fairness. When small businesses struggle, so do our communities. Local jobs disappear, tax revenues dwindle, and the character of our towns fades away. The rules of the game seem rigged in favor of the biggest players. Tax breaks for corporations, deregulation that benefits the powerful, and trade deals that ship jobs overseas. It's no wonder so many Americans feel like the system is working against them. We need to level the playing field and create an environment where small businesses can thrive. That means supporting policies that encourage entrepreneurship, provide access to capital, and promote fair competition.
I'm going to try to give you a picture of what's really important here. All of us drive through towns if we get off the main road, and we go through the rural towns of America, and we see that they look a lot like this. They look boarded up, and we wonder what happened to the reason why they began in the first place. Now, I go back to 1982 when I worked for Casio. And when I worked for Casio and flew around and met with the mass retailers and department stores and power retailers and membership clubs, anytime I gave them a price that was not on my price sheet, I had a form that I had to fill out, because to give favored pricing to one customer over another without justification would be against the law. It would be price fixing. Now, I only saw that in 1982 through 84 when I worked at Casio. As we deregulated America, we took things away that prohibited the wealthiest from getting more wealthy, and we created opportunities for the wealthiest to suppress emerging ideas, and we allowed our communities to disintegrate in favor of mass market power. Now, this cycles back to me as a person responsible for product management and marketing when I was at Brother International. Because I had a product, a MIDI sequencer product for the music industry. Brother had never been in that market before. And when we launched it, within 6 months, we had 60% of the market. And as anyone will tell you, any success of any kind has to come somewhat from a little bit of good fortune coming your way. And what came in my way was Richie Ash of Sam Ash Company, looking at what we were bringing to the market, what had happened to the market so far that brought his attention to what was happening. And he said, listen, if I go out at this price and put it in my mail order flyers and send it all over the country, two things will happen. First of all, people who never had access to a music store in parts of the country that are just off the beaten road, they'll be able to buy the product. And when they do, even though my product is discounted a lot more than everyone else's, with the price that they would have to pay in postage, if you had a store on this retail street, he would be able to compete with me. She would be able to compete with me. That store would be able to compete in the small community and provide the jobs and the income and the livelihood that's necessary for that community's economy. And that's how the world worked in my earliest days of doing business. Eventually, we didn't have to do that anymore. We could give any price we wanted to anyone. So what happened is I built a market, up 60% of the whole market, maybe even more. In Southern California, my sales rep there had relationships with every key retailer in the market except one. And that was Guitar Center. And we sat down with Guitar Center and we gave them the same offer we offered to Sam Ash. They went out into the marketplace and they sold it at the they sold it at the wholesale price, the best wholesale price.
They went out to retail with the absolute market-killing, slaughtering price that was equal to the best wholesale price that I offered all the other retailers in town who all had stock on the shelves to sell. I went back for the reorder because, of course, they sold immediately through their inventory. Just massive, just incredible sales. Nothing like it. Just swiftly moving through stuff. And we sat down at the meeting and they said, boy, that was really good. But now we need 30% gross margin for corporate headquarters. So here's the price that we're going to pay for the next time we order. I went back to my company, sat down with the chairman in an open door conversation and asked about what the investment in future in music products was going to be at the company. The P-Touch product was starting to get some traction, and today it's about $3 billion worth of business, which, you know, in the whole USA music business back in the 80s was about $3 billion, under 4. And we had to make a decision about where we saw ourselves, especially since the pathway that we thought we were going to build, some buyer at some power retailer decided that they were going to control our market. And we're not going to let amateurs run our show. And that was our decision. My rep kept saying, oh, you got to take this deal. You got to take this deal. I mean, he was working for 2 years to get that meeting, to get us where we were, but he never kept his customer under control. He always assumed the big orders were the best orders. And that's the best way to have a short life in anything. You need to understand the consequences. Walmart got the best price. Not only that, but when you sat down at Walmart meetings, and I've been to a few, they'll say, maybe you could make this handle a little different, or maybe you could take off one of those wheels, and maybe we could cut the price and get it to here, to get it to here, to get it to here, so that we can go out and shut down everybody on this street. That wasn't how their dad started the business when the Walmart kids took over. But when all you're offering people is price, you really don't have much else to offer.